The time is officially 6 g.m. This is the No Vaseline Podcast at 6 g.m. Hey there, it's me, your host, Grace Marie. Happy Independence, everybody. Really cannot believe it has been 59 years since KK did his thing. Although some may say we are not truly free, at least we are somewhat free. Better than being held captive, right? Well, with freedom and independence, people become quite radical, game changers, abstract thinkers, and inevitably history makers. We may celebrate independence for a week and still have independence fever for up to 3 days after, but no one in Zambia can celebrate freedom better than the one and only Captain Solo, as he did in 1997, executing his freedom to do things quite well. I didn't know that this happened, and I feel like this is the history that should be taught in school. Forget explorers like Livingstone, I would read a whole chapter just about this specific event, the people involved, and the humbling that took place many years later. As with the last episodes, show notes are available at novavaselinepodstudio.com. If you have any information that needs to be corrected, please send me a message and I will gladly add what I have missed out. But without further ado, grab your coffee, tea, or sparkling glass of water and let's get right into it. Okay, so I will try as much as possible to reduce the noise in the background because I'm recording this from my boarding house and I'm probably putting the mic really close to my mouth, so I just forgive whatever noise is in the background. I kind of wish I recorded this back home, but I couldn't go back home this weekend. Student life. I've got so many assignments and I can't manage back there. Alright, so I will try as much as possible to record without too much background noise. Back to the story, right? The first time I heard about this was from my dad in the car. He briefly just mentioned that there was a coup in Zambia so many years back. I know I laughed and it was funny to think that such a thing could have ever happened, especially with the nature of denizens. Zambians are a chill people if you ask me. I mean, we tolerate a lot of crap and we forgive you as long as whatever you're doing does no real harm. So, a coup? Really an attempted coup. That sounds like something that happens in other countries, but I kid you not, it did happen 3 times. For the people who don't know exactly what the Coup'Detat is, according to Britannica, Coup'Detat is also called coup, and Lord knows I tried as much as possible to get this pronunciation right. I'm probably butchering it right now, but you just hear me say it the way I'm saying it right now. So, back to the definition. According to Britannica, Coup'Detat is also called coup, the sudden, violent overthrow of an existing government by a small group. It requires some control of military forces, police, and similar institutions. So think the famous Napoleon Bonaparte, Robert Mugabe being forced out of presidency in Zimbabwe, and a more recent example is what happened in Afghanistan. Currently, the African continent has had the most coups d'etat that are successful as well as those that are attempted. A steady over 200 throughout the continent, and these are after most countries got independence, so like 1950 to date. Following close by is South America, which has Bolivia, Chile, Ecuador, and Argentina at the top of the list. The country with the most coup attempts before 1945 is Chile, with 30 attempts in total and 6 successful coups. In recent history, though, the country with the most successful coups and attempts is Bolivia, with their stats reaching 33. The country with the most successful coups is Thailand, having a steady 10 coups and 5 attempts. Okay, so now that you know like a bit of coup history and a bit of coup trivia, let's start a little history adventure with Captain Solo. And it's a random place to start, but it's a place to start. I just need you guys to remember this information about him as we go along. So, Captain Solo, a cool name, right? Some artists should learn from him how to give yourself a great stage name. Emphasis on stage name. He was born on January 6, 1962 at Mansa General Hospital. He became a part of the Zambian army and eventually became a captain. While working with the army, he was placed under the education department, so he was like a teacher at Arakan Barracks. Some people say he was ill mentally, but we will never truly know because this is speculation, and I got this like word of mouth from someone else, so it could be true, it could be not true, because my sources could be, not entirely correct. This is Zambian information. We don't always get the full picture. And even if he did have a mental illness, he would not even seek treatment because of the terrible state of the mental health sector in this country. No, guys, mental health is also physical health. Please look after your mental. Okay? All right. So now that we've talked about him, please remember, Captain, Zambian Army, Arakan Barracks. Very important information, pertinent to later. Now, the workers at the state-owned media station did not expect to be visited for the third time by military personnel fed up with the current government and under their own independent leaders' orders. Yep, you have heard me right, the freaking third time. It was at this point that I'm sure that they decided that security at any Zambian National Broadcasting Corporation studio, ZNBC studio, needs to be super tight. They never allowed just anyone inside the gate. You have to show them your ID, mention what you're going to be doing at the studio, as well as who you'll be with and the name of your show and which set you'll be using. Like all these details, when you just get to the gate, they have to give them all these details. You have to give them you need to know exactly what you're going to be doing there. So yeah, extremely tight security, and I don't blame them at all because it's like the third time they're reporting such a cool incident, right? Now, you might be thinking, what events could have inspired today's person of interest? I'm glad you asked. And as I said earlier, it is a history adventure. It all started when KK decided to make this still new country of Zambia, not even 10 years old, a one-party state. They call it a de jure. So another a fact for you, a one-party state is called a de jure. In December 1972, Kaunda declared Zambia as a one-party state. Obviously, people were angry, why all of a sudden? Okay, so firstly, by this year, 1972, Kaunda had ruled the country almost 2 terms of presidency, and also, that's one reason. And then the second reason is United Progressive Party, UPP, was becoming extremely popular. And that same year, it was banned, and its members were arrested. That's suspicious, and this arresting happened earlier on, before the one-party state thing happened. 1972 is kind of halfway through his second term, so as he's preparing to go for the next election, so you need a magnifying glass right there. You need a whole magnifying glass to see what's going on. So, and you just start thinking this information, why don't they teach us all this in secondary school history? Maybe they learn, but I mean, entering the exam room, right, and writing an essay on all the things that happened between 1964 and 2005 is way more interesting than the not very important explorers who only have a year and the words was funded by Royal something council to come and do some exploration. That's boring. The things that happened between 1964 and 2005, this is why this podcast was made. Exactly why this podcast was made. Zambian history, it literally came out it came straight out of a storybook. And frankly, it's super dramatic. I feel like it's dramatic. It's like one huge build up of action, and then it drops, and then again there's a build up of action, and then it drops. Anyway, again, that's the reason I'm talking about it. Also, while we are on the topic, did you know that Simon Mansaka Pwepwe is not just the answer to your exam question asking you to list freedom fighters? He was the leader of the UPP, the party that made KK so uncomfortable that he made the country a one-party state. Yep. The same Kapwepwe who was given barely a line of information in our textbooks could have been the president of Zambia. Not once, but twice. No wonder he has a whole airport named after him. And this is a long story. This man deserves a whole episode, but it is a story for another day. Now, the first time a Coup'Detat was plotted and publicly outed was 1980. So even though I said that ZNBC was attacked 3 times, the first time wasn't an attack on ZNBC, but an attack in the sense that there were people who were going to do it and people at ZNBC knew, and that's probably where it was going to go. around this time, the economy, like around this time being 1980, the economy was declining rapidly. Kaunda was experimenting with socialism, and Zambia was extremely involved in the independence of her neighbors. So it wasn't a good time, if you ask me, because Zambia had just gained independence, kind of, and he was being ambitious. If you can guess, 1980s, around the time South Africa also got independence, we were extremely involved with that. Again, a whole other story for another day, because did you know that the High Court was bombed? Like, maybe if you took history, you would have known that, but like, I didn't take history, and the only person who told me this was my dad. The same time he talked about the coup, he was like, there was a bomb here. And my grandfather was like, oh yeah, I remember that time. We were the ones trying to like detonate bombs. I can't even remember the story exactly, but I assure you that when I do that episode, you people will be shocked. Zambia was so involved in the independence of the other countries. This country was dying. Like, we were barely on a wooden cane. We were barely standing. And Kaunda was like, socialism. Let's help the other countries gain independence. And if you look at the relationship that Zambia has with South Africa now, like, it's okay, but like, a lot of questions, if you ask me, for a country that helped the other country gain independence. Too many questions. Now, this plot involved a man named Valentine Musakanya, labeled by some close to Simon Kapwepwe as Kapwepwe's successor after his death in January 1980. So, Simon Mansa Kapwepwe sadly passed in January of this year, and a lot of his people who are close to him, because he was also kind of involved with this plot, like he was going to be the one to take Valentine's place had he not died. So it was like, okay, Kapwepwe is dead, so who's going to take up this slot? Who's going to carry the mantle? And everyone was looking to this man called Valentine Musakanya. Many people were involved in this one plot, which could be why it was squashed even before it could really happen. It's also the only coup plan that was actually organized with top officials, prominent businessmen, and public political figures. So all these huge people were involved in this one coup. In early 1980, there were talks of removing Kaunda's government by people such as Musakanya. Others involved were Shamwana and two lawyers, and Anfield and Mundia Sikatana. Now, remember, for it to be a coup, military and such institutions must be in. So at the time, this plot engaged Army Brigadier General Godfrey Mianda and Air Force Chief Christopher Kabwe. Those two guys. So military, small group, coup. The plan kind of went like this. Kabwe, who was in charge of ZAF and hence the air travels of the president, was going to organize the diversion of Kaunda's plane to a base where he would be persuaded to publicly step down. The candidates to replace Kaunda, remember? Valentine Musakanya or Shamwana. In April, Kaunda called out some people for plotting a coup, which many of them denied even though they were actually planning one. Eventually, on October 24th, 1980, Musakanya, Elias Chipimo, Patrick Chisanga, and Christopher Kabwe were arrested for the plotting of a coup. The day before, a farm on Chilanga was raided by police in relation to the same plotting of a coup. It is said that they conspired with some people from Zaire, which is DR Congo right now, and were getting help from the South Africans in order to get Kaunda out of power. So again, like, this relationship with trying to help the other countries gain independence, if South Africa is not happy with Kaunda being the president, then why is he putting resources to help South Africa get independent, right? I mean, and it's out of goodwill, but like, you see the sass. Edward Jack Shamwana, Valentine Shuna Musakanya, Mundia Sikatana, Godwin Yoram Mumba, Anderson Kambali Mporkoso, Macpherson Numbulo, Patrick Mukandaurire, Matinanga Liswaniso, Thomas Mupunga Mulewa, Godfrey Mianda, Diogratis Siamba, Albert Chilambe, Chilambile and Roger Kanyembu Kabwita were charged with treason and sentenced to death in 1981. So all these people, I just had to mention their names. Some of them sound familiar, yeah, you probably know some of them. They sound very familiar. So all of them were involved in this coup, and they were the ones arrested and charged with treason. They were sentenced to death in the following year, 1981. 10 years later, in 1990, Lieutenant Christopher Mamba Luchembe led another group of people who are pissed with KK's government for the third time since he became president. So remember, time number 1, changing Zambia into a one-party state. Time number 2 is the socialism and helping independence issue. So this is number 3. Things were looking bad for the country 10 years later, only 10 years later. Luchembe was born on 14th February 1960 in the northern province of the then Northern Rhodesia. He went to Isoka Boys Secondary School and afterward took part in the ZNS training program in Kasama. After his training, he decided to join the Zambia Army, specializing in communications and signals at Kohima Barracks in 1980. By this time, Kaunda had been the president for 25-26 years. Things were not looking good in the country again, and people were getting fed up with him being president. Our economy was headed for, saying it as it should be, the economy was in the trenches. It wasn't heading towards. It was in the trenches, plummeting, getting worse every single day. The natural response, as it is almost always with the Zambians, is rioting. These riots killed 24 people and injured more than 100. So when Luchembe was given the chance to come to the capital because of the riots, he took it and with many other officers did what he thought was the right thing to do in order to get this country back on track. Take over by force. Remember, military force, small group of people who want to take over government. Coup. However, KK was not in Lusaka at the time. He was in Ndola, and I know this for sure because I asked my grandfather about this and he was like, oh, I remember this time. His best friend's wife, I don't know if I call him his best friend, but one of his good friends' wife was the secretary to Kaunda. And around that time, because she's the secretary, she used to move around with him and they were in Ndola. And then because they were in Ndola and because of this whole incident, my grandfather was able to seek shelter in his friend's house during this whole coup operation taking place. So yeah, Kaunda was in Ndola, unfortunately, or rather, however. July 1st, 1990 was quite an eventful morning. The night before, almost all communication was disrupted. That means cell phone towers, airport, radio, and most importantly, ZNBC mass media complex. At 3 a.m. that morning, Luchembe went live on radio and television announcing that he had overthrown the Kaunda government and the military was taking over. Remember, military, taking over government, small group. Done. Denizens at the time, firstly, were on edge because the government was now seemingly overthrown and no one was saying anything contrary to the announcements. The people who were done, for lack of a better term, were done with KK were happy, which frankly was almost everyone. So some went to State House to celebrate outside. It is said that the guards there might have used some firearms and killed some people, but this was not reported by local media. It was on ZNBC. Not ZNBC. I apologize. BBC. ZNBC didn't report anything because, state media. What can they report? If they report that some guards at State House killed some people who were there to celebrate Kaunda being overthrown, it would have been a whole issue, right? A really bad thing for the government to smooth over. Meanwhile, while all that celebration is taking place at State House, mass media, at around 9 a.m., some army personnel, still loyal to the now frail Kaunda reign, surrounded Luchembe and managed to arrest him along with his school companions. This attempt lasted for a total of 6 hours, and even though it failed, it made Kaunda's reign reach its weakest point ever. So even though the aim of the coup was not reached, it did something. It did something huge, really huge. While being arrested, Luchembe said some pretty thought-provoking words, calling the people who arrested him Kaunda's pets, quote unquote, which I kind of think, okay, like, because I'm a skeptic, I think it's correct, but it's not correct. But I'm sure they did it more for peace, not because they're Kaunda's pets. We all know how we love peace, so I'm pretty sure they did it more for peace. And then also there's this thing where if you are favored by the president, you get more money and you don't suffer as much as other people in the country. So I'm pretty sure that they were like, okay, even though things are a bit weak right now, maybe they'll get back better, and because we've done this, things will look brighter for us. It didn't go as planned. It didn't go as planned for those guys. Despite what happened, something needed to change, and part of that change was getting people out of power. You know who we're talking about. Well, it seems that as the people wished, the people were granted their wish. 1991 was a year of change, the first multi-party elections in what seemed to have been forever. For context, the last multi-party election was in 1968. So, yeah, I think you just need to savor that for a moment. 1968 to 1991. That's a long time. It's a very, very long time. Like, sometimes when I even think back to it, I was like, my mother was born in a one-party state. And she lived in a one-party state for like the first 5 to 6 years of her life. Isn't that interesting? It wasn't even 5 or 6 years. It was like, because she was born in 75, 85. So almost like 20 years of her life. So majority of her childhood, she was in a one-party state. A lot of our parents were born in a one-party state. Like, throughout this whole period of the one-party state, some people were born and some people died. Like, that's a lot to absorb. It really is a lot to absorb. Okay? Alright. The 1991 election made Frederick Chiluba the president under his pressure group turned political party, the Movement for Multi-Party Development, MMD. When are we going to talk about the main subject of this whole coup thing? Why we're talking about coups? Who was the main character? Who is the person my dad told me about in the beginning? Alright? Who is what's Captain Solo's story? Well, this is what I'm about to tell you guys. So buckle up. This guy was the past failed attempts on steroids, kind of. Okay, it was a lot. So Zambia, remember where we ended the story? We ended the story on MMD, right? Chiluba became the president under the MMD, and if you listen to, I think, one of the previous episodes, you would know that the MMD is like a party with a lot of history. It's been there for quite some time, and we just kind of touched on how the MMD became part of the political space in Zambia through Chiluba. So, Zambia enjoyed its peace for a long time until things started getting rough with Chiluba, okay? This was the reason for Captain Solo's attempt at taking over the country under an operation called Operation Born Again by the National Redemption Council. This operation took place on October 28, 1997. He mobilized about 50 soldiers who raided the armory at 4 a.m., began firing gunshots outside the State House, ZNBC Mass Media Complex, and the Army Commander's house. They managed to capture the commander and his family, but the commander managed to escape and secure the president and the first family at a safe location. So this guy didn't just recruit any soldiers, okay? He recruited among the top 50, because who has the guts to kidnap their boss? No one has the guts to kidnap their boss. To start firing gunshots outside State House. We know how secure State House is. To just go to mass media and be like, okay guys, we're taking over, it's 4 a.m. Stop what you're doing. We are we are taking over right now. Whether I like it or not, we are your new bosses. This guy was in it. Like, he was in it for real. He was like, this is what we're doing this, and we're doing it right now. He wasn't stopping. Okay, so Mwamba Luchimbe on steroids, kind of. Alright. So Captain Solo went to ZMBC at 6 a.m. Solo, through the state radio, announced that an angel had told him to take over the country and that the Coup'Detat had taken over the country. Okay, so he was told by an angel to take over the country, and he did it. He also gave an ultimatum to the president, Chiluba, who had to either resign or die. That's a bold statement. So we now have like a backstory to why they were around State House, right? We now know why they were around State House, because they were like, either Chiluba gives up or we kill him. Very bold statement. Now, you would think that denizens would support Solo because they were again unimpressed by the current government. However, it seemed as though he was not taken very seriously by the presenters and workers at ZMBC, who were heard laughing in the background. It was that same day that some people who are parents today and maybe our aunts and uncles were supposed to write their first national exam, a grade 7 exam, and it was cancelled because of this guy, Captain Solo. Okay, so like, people were laughing in the background. Others were like, we just need to write our exam. You know, no one was taking him quite seriously. But this guy had planned, like, he was ready for it, okay? He was in it. He was like, he's even thought of what he was going to do when he became the president already. I'm pretty sure at that point, like, he was ready. But denizens were like, okay, you're compromising our safety. Can you leave? Cause, like, no one cared. Remember with the last one, with Mwamba Luchimbe, everyone was riled up. They were like, get Kaunda out of here. We don't want Kaunda anymore. But with Captain Solo, it's more like, dude, relax. Okay? Things will get back to normal. We're trying to stabilize the economy. And, you know, a lot of things were going on because if you remember, around Chiluba's time, people were still getting used to, like, the new kind of, like, economy. I don't know how long it takes for a country to get used to an economy, but like, people were okay with Chiluba. Like, they were okay with him, even though, like, he has some grievances. We'll see later on. Probably I'll do an episode on him as well. But people were alright. They were just like, we have a way of doing things. Can you please follow the way we do things? So people were fed up. People were laughing at him. People were like, this man is crazy. Okay. So again, the way he's being treated, reiterating the notion that this guy, Captain Solo, had a mental illness. So it's kind of like reinforcing each other. Like, each action that he takes is reinforcing the notion that people have of him. We don't know whether it's true. And I'm not speculating that it's true. All I'm saying is that these are the things that people were saying. People were like, this guy, you know, and probably because of this attitude that they had towards him, they started spreading this rumor. They started talking about such things about him. They made these conclusions about him. We will never truly know because he's the only one who could have told us. And as I'll tell you later, this guy's dead. He's dead, so he can't tell us. The whole city of Lusaka was at a standstill. And denizens were at the edge of their seats. They did not know what was going to happen. They didn't know. At 7 a.m., special forces from Ndola began their journey to come to Lusaka, and it seems like all officers around the country began preparing and making their journey to ZMBC mass media. So this guy this is why I said that he didn't just pick any 50 soldiers. He picked like the best 50, because these 50 raided the Zambia army armory. Okay, that's not any kind of armory, as I've mentioned. It's just any armory. It's a very technical armory, very safe armory. It's very complicated. So if they manage to raid that armory, these guys are pretty good, okay? Pretty good. Almost every soldier around the country was coming to Lusaka just at one point. ZMBC. Alright? Everyone was glued to their radios and TVs all over the country. Like, the whole Zambia, everyone is like either on the phone or the radio. People are just anticipating, you know, what's going to happen next. Denizens were also advised to stay indoors, especially those around mass media area, because it would be dangerous to go outside. Again, all these military personnel from all over the country are coming to mass media area just to stop Captain Solo. The officers deployed from Ndola arrived in LSK around 9 a.m. The people close to the action said it was like a movie scene, like it was just an action movie, okay? You'd see the commandos capturing some people, others were running away seeking shelter. It was so action-packed, and by 10 a.m. it was announced that Captain Solo was arrested and the attempted coup had been quelled. So his coup kind of lasted like 2 to 3 hours, which it's like 2 to 3 hours. He held up as much as he could. He put up a really good fight. It wasn't like Luchembeza lasted 6, but these 2 to 3 hours were so good. Actually, not even 2 to 3 hours, because if you went by, yeah. So like these hours were just so stressful. Kind of like they were so stressful because everyone was glued to their TV. Everyone was anticipating what would happen next. This guy seemed to be so organized. Like if he probably had another 100 officers within the army who were coming in and were not satisfied with Chiluba, and he got those people. It seems like he was pretty convincing. If he got those people, this guy would have managed to take over the country. Captain Solo's coup might have been a laughing stock-ish. He himself might have been a laughing stock. The whole situation might have been somewhat out of a comedy, but the ability of this man to do what he did it's amazing. It's just so huge. It's so big, because even though the other two coups, that other one involved so many officials, so many important businessmen of Lusaka, so many important people such as the army commander and the ZAF chief officer, that and Mwamba Luchembe cannot top off what this man did. It cannot. Because he outdid everything. He outdid everything. Okay. So his coup was quelled completely by 10 a.m. We thank God, because that was such a stressful situation. If this guy had convinced 50 soldiers, like great 50 soldiers, what would he have done if he had the ability to talk to the other soldiers? Alright? He would have taken over the country, quite literally. The first words by Chiluba after the coup were, "The devil is defeated," implying that Captain Solo was an enemy, which, I mean, he was an enemy, kind of. Chiluba then declared a state of emergency and arrested several people suspected to be part of the coup attempt by Captain Solo, including people in the opposition, and some other people like Princess Nakatimbi Wina and Kenneth Kaunda. In 1997, 58 soldiers were convicted of treason, and at the same time, the punishment for treason was capital punishment, death by hanging. Another officer was sentenced to 21 years imprisonment because he knew of the coup but failed to tell his supervisors. In 2003, during the presidency of Levi Mwanawasa, Captain Jack Chiti, Captain Solo's co-conspirator was given presidential pardon because of his illness. He later died in 2004. Stephen Lungu, Captain Solo, was given presidential pardon by Rupia Banda after staying in prison for 13 years due to tuberculosis. Stephen Lungu then asked Chiluba to visit him because he wanted to apologize in person, which happened. I mean, Zambia is a Christian nation, okay? We forgive our enemies. He became a redeemed Christian. Stephen Lungu, Captain Solo. He even stopped going by Captain Solo, so just out of respect from now, I was just going to be referring to him as Stephen Lungu. So Stephen Lungu became a redeemed Christian who gave his life to God while he was in prison. So he became extremely remorseful. That's why he even asked to see Chiluba in person and apologize in person. Stephen Lungu died at Kanyama Hospital on 11th August 2011. This is hands off one of the most interesting episodes I did research for. I just kept reading non-stop, and I advise you all to read about all the 3 attempts and the people behind them. They're so interesting. I mean, human beings are interesting. Each one of us is a story of our own. Whichever genre we kind of stumble upon in our lives, right? I mean, that's That's where we are. So all these people, so interesting. You should just read about them, read more about them, because these stories help us understand where we are now and what the country's stance is on such issues, and why we don't make too many comments on countries that are undergoing this. I have never, not even in the furthest reaches of my imagination, thought that 3 times military trained professionals would try to take over government. So much information is missing from our history curriculum, and I bet you this is not the last episode I will ever say this. I have also come to realize that a lot of the times when people or someone overstays their time in power, they tend to get weak. As in, look at Keke and how it ended for him so badly. In less than a week, by the way. I didn't mention this earlier, but everything changed. Just after Mwamba Luchembe had this attempted coup, just within that week, things went so badly for Keke. He lost all his political power because a determined soldier from the northern province knew how to wire a radio. Another thing that I wanted you to note is how these coups are going, like how they're happening, right? So a pattern that's consistent is, number 1, the leader is in power for way too long. That's like one thing, like it's happening when the leader is in power for way too long. Number 2, the leader is making really unstable decisions. Like, these decisions that the leaders are making are not making any sense to the citizens, and it's not helping the citizens in any way. Number 3, economical distress. Most of the times that people talk about coups, it's because the country is in economic distress. Remember, the first time that the attempted coup happened is because Kaunda was like, socialism, help other countries get independence. Oh my gosh, my country is failing economically, and he went silent. The second time, Mwamba Luchembe was like, guys, there are riots and the economy is still in the trenches. Just like 10 years after the previous coup plan was destroyed. And this one for Chiluba, it was like the country was still trying to get back on her feet, because remember, under Chiluba's time, there was privatization. People were still getting used to such this huge economic change, and things were not looking good for the country. There was a lot of corruption, and Chiluba wanted to stay in power for even longer than he should have stayed. So, similar traits all the time. And when you see these things happening, when you see that these things are starting to happen, you'll be like, oh my gosh, someone is going to break in the military. Someone in the military is going to break, and something is going to happen. So those things are the things that are common in these 3 stories, these 3 separate, kind of like unrelated but kind of related events by 3 different people. I mean, officials, your army commander and your chief officer for the ZAF. They're not happy with you. Like, there's a lot to unpack in that one. There's a lot to unpack in the fact that determined soldiers from the northern province, which is kind of funny because Valentine Mosakanya, Mwamba Luchembe, and Captain Solo, although he's Stephen Lungu, those people are kind of like from the upper part of the country, right? So, no, I'm not saying that it's a trait, but you can tell the people who, when they're fed up and they want you out. That's how it is with them. I know even like it's brutal throughout the country, but these guys, when they're fed up, they're like, bruh, get out. That's just how they are. They're like, get out. I mean, try to make a Bemba man angry, please. You won't be happy. You'll be upset the whole day. Literally upset the whole day. Just argue with them and you're going to be pissed off the whole day. That's how bad it is. So learning this can help us to understand ways of preventing coups and ways to like kind of mitigate and educate each other. The reason why we don't do such things, okay? My 2 cents. My 2 cents from learning about Coup'Detat is that the best way to get rid of a government is by voting and not by force. Very important point. a lot of the times after a coup, countries will fall into stuff like dictatorships, which are way worse than complaining about the price of milk. Trust me. I mean, look at all these countries that have suffered coup after coup after coup after coup after coup after coup after coup. I mean, Africa is a huge, like a big, like it's an example. You can even tell the difference in the countries where there have been multiple coups and the countries where there are coups almost all the time. You can tell how terrible it is to be in a country that has a coup. You can tell how bad leaders are in countries where they've had multiple coups, okay? And once you have one successful coup, you just keep on having them. Because it's the only way to get rid of the ruling government, which causes war, and so many terrible things follow. When you have one coup, then the only time you can get rid of this coup, because this coup will lead into a dictatorship and this leader will want to be the leader for the rest of their life. And then now the only time that you can, or the only way that you can get rid of this leader is if another guy from the military says, okay, guy, get out, we're taking over by force. You can't do it democratically. You just keep on chasing one after the other, one coup after the other, another coup, another coup, another coup. Next thing you know, war. You don't want a war. I mean, do I need to explain how terrible wars are? So many things that are bad just follow, okay? The country doesn't develop. People are always suffering in places where there are coups. So please, uphold peace and do things the right way, democratically, through a vote. I know you are tired. I know you are pissed. I know the price of milk is 300 kwacha for a 25 kg bag, but please do not stand up and say, I'm going to take over the government by using the military and we're going to take over by force and it's going to be a coup. You failed to get out. Power is nice, guys. That's why Keke didn't want to leave. Power is so good. It feels nice. It feels nice to be in power. And once you're in power, you don't want to leave. And once you're in power by force, it's like, I feel like this is the mentality that they have. You took over, right? So for someone to take over, you already know the mentality of the person who would also want to take over. So each time that I feel like you have a coup, coups get more complicated every day. So it's really difficult to get rid of or to prevent another coup. So it's a lot of work. All right. So I really, really want to encourage everyone that even if the price of milk is bad, even if the price of water is bad, even if the price of fuel is terrible, the best way to get rid of people who are working in government, who are not satisfied with, who you are unimpressed with, vote. Get up and vote. Okay. Whether you know English, don't know English, please. Voter education in Zambia caters all our languages, okay? And you cannot tell me that just because you don't know Bemba, you can't hear something in Nyanja and you won't pick one thing or another. Everyone is willing to do voter education. Voter education is there, especially during the time of election. Please, if you don't know anything about elections, go and be educated. People are willing to teach you about about elections. People are willing to teach you about our country. Please, please, please make sure you get the correct voter education. You register yourself as a voter and go to the polls. I know that standing in that line is a lot of work, but it's a lot of work and it's important for you because at the end of the day, you will stand in that line for 6 hours, but this man will be in power. This woman will be in power. This human being will be in power for the next 5 freaking years, either taking you through the worst 5 years of your life or be uplifting you through those 5 years. So please, please, please go to vote and practice this habit of voting. Wherever you go, wherever you're told that there's elections and you are mandated to vote, vote. Whether it be your university, whether it be your national elections, even just within your workplace, if you are being told to vote for something, please vote because your choice matters. Each vote is a voice, and I don't even need to go into detail explaining how your vote is your voice. Please, guys, just always register to be a voter. Go to vote, even though it's painful, even though it's bad. Please register. Please vote. Please make yourself aware of the country's election rules and stuff. Read the law, okay? Be like a good model citizen, all right? Please do as much as you can to educate yourself on how elections work, how people come into power, what kind of rules these people have. It's very important to educate yourself with those things because it equips you, it protects you even as you go to vote, because even though you're going to vote, you're still a vulnerable person, okay? So please voter education, keep yourself learned, educated, draw as much as you can, okay? Even if the next election is in 5 years, learn about our election system, the 50% plus one, right? Learn about the election systems that are using these various elections, whichever elections that we're going to have, council elections, mayoral elections, parliament elections. I don't even know, I'm forgetting the names of these elections. Just like whenever you have a by-election, whenever you have any election, especially if it comes to your community, please, I'm begging you, vote. You do not want to take people out by force. It's very embarrassing for the person who is in power, and it puts you, the voting community, in a very vulnerable position, no matter where you're voting from. All right? Please uphold peace. Do things the right way, democratically, through a vote. I will not stop talking about voting. I would like to know what thoughts you have about this scandal, shocking event, case, and until next time, stay paired. We have come to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for listening. I really enjoy interacting with you also. To connect with me, you could leave me a message here through Spotify for podcasters, or on Instagram. You could leave a comment on the website, and if you feel like it, send me an email. All the links are below. Bye!